I still remember the moment like it had just happened, etched into my bones like a scar you don't see but always feel. It was a Thursday morning, and I was by the office coffee machine, adding my usual dash of oat milk to my morning blend. The world felt routine, predictable, until Ryan walked in. Ryan, the new CEO, son of the company's founder. A man who had inherited power but never earned respect. He didn't greet me, didn't even acknowledge my presence. He looked at me like I was part of the furniture. Then, in a voice colder than winter rain, he said, "Lily, I need to see you in my office." Now, it wasn't a request. It was a verdict. I had been with the company for nearly 11 years. I had built the client services department from the ground up, trained over half the staff sitting just outside his door. I negotiated more than 100 contracts. I stayed late. I missed holidays. I cried silently through my divorce while taking calls. I gave them everything. But none of that mattered to Ryan. His father, Mr. Cole, built this company with grit, loyalty, and humanity. Ryan inherited it like a spoiled child unwrapping a toy he didn't understand. I followed him into his sleek, glass-walled office, trying to push down the knot of unease building in my chest. He didn't even sit down. "You're fired," he said, voice flat. "We don't need lazy people like you dragging this place down." At first, I blinked, confused. I thought maybe he was joking. Twisted, yes, but a joke. "Excuse me." "You heard me." He casually flipped through a stack of papers like he was choosing lunch. "Collect your things. Leave. Effective immediately." My heart thundered in my chest. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to demand a reason. But something inside me, something stronger, chose dignity over drama. I gave him a calm, deliberate smile. "Understood. Have a nice day, Ryan." I walked out with my head high, even though inside I was crumbling. My teammates looked up as I passed, confused. A few stood, ready to protest. I gave them a small shake of the head. "Please, don't make this harder." I packed my desk in silence. As I drove home, the weight of it all hit me like a storm I hadn't seen coming. 11 years. Gone. I had given this company more than I had given myself. More than I gave my own family. I sacrificed birthdays, holidays, healing time. And in the end, I was dismissed like a stain on the carpet. But I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious. Something about the way he fired me didn't sit right. The timing was wrong. We were about to finalize one of the company's largest deals, the Kingswell account. I had spent 6 months nurturing that deal. I knew the clients, their fears, their hopes. I was the one who built the bridge. And we were set to finalize it this Friday. Why would he fire me now? That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to that one question. Why? The next morning, just past 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring. But something inside me, curiosity, instinct, maybe hope, made me answer. "Lily, it's Mr. Cole." The voice hit me like a bolt of electricity. "I just walked into the office," he said, his voice tight. "Why the hell did you pack up and leave?" I hesitated. "Your son fired me." Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. "What?" "Yesterday. He said I was lazy and not needed anymore." The silence stretched longer this time. When Mr. Cole spoke again, it was slow, as if trying to stay calm. "Lily, did he read your contract?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's supposed to finalize the Kingswell deal today, right?" "Yes." The meeting was set for 11 a.m. Jesus Christ. I heard the rustle of papers. A loud thud followed. He must have slammed something down. "Lily, your contract has a clause," he said. One I made sure was included after that disaster during the last acquisition. "You're not just the account manager. You're the only authorized negotiator for the Kingswell deal." I froze. The room around me faded. He can't close the deal without you, Mr. Cole continued. Not legally. Not ethically. Not even practically. The contract requires you to be present. And then it hit me slowly, sharply. Like sunlight slicing through fog. Ryan hadn't read the contract. He had fired me without understanding the consequences. He thought he was making a power move. He had fired the one person he needed the most. The betrayal still stung. The dismissal. The disregard. But now something else began to bloom within me. Control. He pulled the trigger, and now the gun was pointed at himself. Mr. Cole didn't say much more. He hung up, but I could feel his fury through the silence. The man who once hired me after a single conversation now saw clearly what his son had just lost. And I realized something in that quiet moment. I wasn't the one who lost. At himself. Mr. Cole had hung up without another word, but I could feel his fury like static in the air, even through the silence. It wasn't just disappointment in his son, it was something deeper. A betrayal of everything he had built. I sat motionless on my couch, the morning light bleeding through the blinds, my coffee growing cold beside me. My hands were clasped in my lap, knuckles white. My eyes stared at nothing in particular, lost in the storm of thoughts spinning through my head. Ryan hadn't known. He had fired me without even reading the contract. A bitter laugh escaped me, quiet, almost broken. After 11 years, this was it? It all came crashing down at the whim of a spoiled, impulsive man-boy playing dress-up as CEO. He made decisions like it was some kind of strategy game. But real life didn't offer undo buttons. Real companies didn't bounce back from mistakes like this. And this mistake, his mistake, was about to erupt. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. Part of me felt like dressing up, going back to that office, and watching the fallout with front-row popcorn. But there was another part of me, the weary, bruised part, the one that had worked through birthdays, bled through deadlines, and buried pride under mountains of deliverables. That part wanted to let them burn. To watch from the outside, as the very bridge he set on fire turned into the rope around his own career. But I didn't have to wait long. At 10:13 a.m., my phone rang again. Ryan. I didn't answer. Another call followed. Reception. Then legal. Then accounting. My phone buzzed relentlessly, lighting up like a Christmas tree, frantic and desperate. I just stared at it. No. I wouldn't be their emergency parachute, not without a reckoning. The voicemail icon blinked. I tapped it open. Lily, hi, it's Ryan. His voice was taut. Frayed. Listen, there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I may have acted too fast. We need you back. Today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. The word echoed through me like wind through an empty hall. Not sorry. Not you were right. Just urgent. I took a sip of my cold coffee, still unmoving, still silent. At 10:32, another number popped up. One I hadn't saved in years. Nicole, a former colleague. We had grown close once, back when she was still in my department before moving to marketing. I hesitated for just a moment, then picked up. Lily, she whispered, barely above a breath. You won't believe what's happening here. Try me. Ryan just got chewed out by his dad. Like, in front of everyone. I raised an eyebrow, sitting up. He walked into the meeting room, slammed the Kingswell contract on the table, and said one thing. Did you read this before firing Lily? I could almost see it. Ryan floundering, panicking. He tried to bluff, talked about moving in a new direction and reevaluating team roles. But Mr. Cole wasn't having it. He flipped right to that clause. The one you always made us review. The sole negotiator clause. Everyone in the room knew what it meant. Except Ryan. She paused, and I could hear the hum of office murmurs in the background. He looked pale, Lily. Ghost pale. Like he just realized he'd set fire to the lifeboat. I let out a slow breath. And Mr. Cole? I asked. He said if this deal falls through, she whispered, Ryan's position becomes negotiable. There it was. The first crack. The beginning of the end for the man who thought he was untouchable. I don't know what you're planning, Nicole added, but whatever it is, you have the upper hand now. I ended the call with a soft, almost reverent, thank you. Then I stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out before me, wide and still. Skyscrapers bathed in late morning light, indifferent to human chaos. And for the first time in days, I breathed. At 11:15, another message came in. Mr. Cole. Lily, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in. Not just for the deal, but so we can talk. Privately. It was tempting. So tempting. But I wasn't ready to just walk back in, brush off the dust, and pretend this didn't happen. Ryan's mistake wasn't just about the contract. It was about respect. It was about trust. And it was about everything I had sacrificed, the years, the family dinners, the sleep, the pieces of myself I gave to make that company better. That couldn't be undone with a voicemail and a negotiation table. Still, something shifted inside me. Not spite. Not revenge. Clarity. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted accountability. I picked up my phone and typed slowly, intentionally. I'll consider returning to finalize the Kingswell deal, but only under specific conditions. I'd like to speak with Mr. Cole directly beforehand. I hit send. Then I set my phone down and changed out of my pajamas. I had a meeting to prepare for, not with desperation, not with bitterness, but with strength. This time, I wasn't coming back to prove my worth. They already knew it. Now, I was coming back on my terms. Finally began to lift. The sky had turned the soft color of dusk, streaked with faded orange and forgiving blue. I paused for a moment in the quiet of the nearly empty parking lot, the sound of my heels slowing against the pavement. For the first time in what felt like days, I could breathe fully again. The last 48 hours had torn something wide open inside me, but it didn't leave me hollow. It made space. Space for truth. For clarity. For the woman I'd become while no one was looking. Behind me was a building that had, for years, swallowed pieces of my life without ever saying thank you. And yet today, I walked out of it not as the woman they overlooked, but as the one they needed. The one they almost lost. The one they now saw, finally, for who she truly was. I had returned not as a backup plan, but as the backbone. Inside that glass-walled boardroom, I had negotiated not just the Kingswell contract, but the restoration of my voice. I had spoken in a language their CEO respected, but more than that, I had spoken from a place no title could give or take, earned power. Ryan's absence from the room was more powerful than any apology he could have offered. His silence, his forced absence, was the loudest statement he had ever made. One that echoed his failure to lead and my refusal to be dismissed. I opened my car door, slipped inside, and sat with the quiet. My phone buzzed, a message from Nicole. Everyone's still buzzing. You walked in like a storm and left like peace. We'll never forget it. I smiled gently, not for the compliment, but because I knew now they'd never try to forget me again. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of wine, not to numb the ache, but to mark the moment. I opened the window, letting in the hum of the evening city, and sat down at my desk. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Lessons from the fire. Why dignity matters more than titles." I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to build from it. Share it. Lead with it. Because I had learned something that day, something I'd buried under years of deadlines and demands. Power isn't something they give you. It's something you take back quietly, boldly, and on your own terms. And now that I had it, I wasn't letting go. Started slipping through the cracks lately. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed the truth. He knew more than he had let on. I assume you've noticed it too, he continued, gently taking a seat across from me. The expense delays. The unsigned documents. The phantom email. I nodded slowly. I've been documenting everything. His expression didn't change, but the corner of his mouth twitched, just slightly. Approval, maybe. Or regret. You shouldn't have to, he said. And yet, you did. That says everything. I looked at the folder again. Legal recognition of everything I had earned. Everything I had fought to defend. And yet, it didn't quiet the unease humming in my bones. I heard Ryan today, I said softly, folding my hands. He's trying to discredit me. Undermine me quietly. Mr. Cole exhaled sharply and leaned back. I suspected. But hearing you say it makes it undeniable. I studied him. The weight of being both a father and a CEO sat heavy on his shoulders, and in that moment, I didn't envy him. Still, I needed to make something crystal clear. I can finish the job, I said. I can protect the clients, lead this team, and drive results. But I won't fight invisible fires every day just to prove I belong. If this continues, I walk, contract or not. His eyes met mine, steady, remorseful. You won't have to, he said. He stood, walked to the glass wall of the boardroom, and stared out into the city. I gave him too much. Too fast, he said again, but softer now, almost like he was admitting it to himself for the first time. But this company doesn't belong to Ryan. And it doesn't belong to me, either. Not anymore. It belongs to the people who keep it breathing. He turned, and for the first time since I returned, I saw something real in his face, not just authority. Accountability. I'll deal with him, he said. And you'll have what you need to lead. Without sabotage. Without shadows. I didn't thank him. Not yet. Promises were words. Change was action. Instead, I nodded once and closed the folder. I'll see you in the morning. As I stepped into the elevator, the building was nearly empty. Just reflections on the marble floor, flickering lights in offices I used to clean up after in silence. But now, I was no longer invisible. The next morning, my desk had been cleaned, organized. A quiet apology, maybe, from the overnight staff. Or a signal. On top of it was a single envelope. Inside, a printed note. Power is not always loud. Sometimes, it's simply surviving long enough to be seen. Unknown. There was no name. But I didn't need one. I sat down, opened my laptop, and got to work. We've traced every action, every login. We know what happened. The room fell into a heavy silence. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Even Ryan's breathing changed shallower, defensive. His smile faltered. David clicked the remote, and the screen behind him lit up with a clear, color-coded timeline. Names, timestamps, machines, all pointing to a pattern that no longer allowed room for denial. You see, David continued, the audit uncovered a deliberate and repeated manipulation of internal systems, emails, spreadsheets, access logs. Most of it directly targeted Lily, though a few incidents involve minor alterations to project reports that had nothing to do with her. Likely to mask the primary focus. Ryan took a step back. This is circumstantial. Anyone could have used those stations. David nodded. True. Which is why we corroborated the timestamps with security badge entries. Every time your assistant's login was used, she was either not in the building or on a different floor. You, however, he tapped a button, were not only nearby, you were in the exact zone. Mr. Cole turned slowly from the window. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Is it true?" he asked, directly to Ryan. "Of course not," Ryan barked. "You're going to believe her over your own son?" "I'm going to believe facts," Mr. Cole said, eyes narrowing. "And right now, they paint a very clear picture. One that includes deception, sabotage, and gross misuse of company infrastructure. You gave her too much power." Ryan snapped. "She was undermining me. Everyone saw it." I stood then, not to shout, not to argue, but to say what needed to be said. "You were never being undermined, Ryan. You were being held accountable. And you didn't like it." His jaw clenched. "You called me lazy," I continued, voice unwavering. "You fired me without reading a contract. You tried to erase my work, my value, and when that didn't work, you tried to ruin my name. This isn't about competition. It's about character. And you've shown yours." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You think one deal makes you a savior?" "No," I said. "But it proved something you never understood. Leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. And you lost that the moment you put your ego ahead of the company." Mr. Cole raised his hand, silencing us both. "I've heard enough," he said quietly. Then to David, "You and your team write up the full report. I want every recommendation, legal and operational." Then he looked at his son. "You're suspended, effective immediately. We'll discuss your future once legal reviews this." Ryan's face drained of color. "You're firing your own son?" "I'm choosing to run this company with integrity," Mr. Cole replied. Something I should have done sooner. Outside the boardroom, the hallway felt brighter. Not just from the morning sun, but from the shift I felt in my chest, like I could finally breathe. Nicole stood near the copy room, eyes wide. "You were brilliant," she whispered. "I was tired," I said. "Tired of pretending it didn't matter." She smiled. "It did. It does." 1 week later, the audit report was shared internally. Quietly, but thoroughly. And with it, a memo from Mr. Cole announcing new ethics protocols, an anonymous reporting system, and the restructuring of executive leadership roles, including the permanent removal of Ryan from any decision-making authority. My office door stayed open that week. People came in, some to thank me, some just to talk. It wasn't about the deal anymore. It was about hope. That maybe, finally, the company was becoming a place worth staying in. And me? I didn't just reclaim my role. I redefined it. I reopened lines of communication that had long been shut. I met with every team, client services, marketing, logistics. Not in boardrooms, but in their own spaces. I asked questions, real ones. I listened, really listened. I made it clear that the days of whispered fear and quiet sabotage were over. Trust doesn't come back overnight, but it can be rebuilt through transparency, through follow-through, and through leadership that values people over politics. We started hosting open forums once a month. Anonymous feedback lines were introduced. Department heads were trained not just in metrics, but in mentorship. One policy I pushed for and passed. Every exit interview had to be reviewed at the executive level, no more disappearing without a voice. Mr. Cole and I met weekly, not just about deliverables, but about direction. And over time, the fear that once clung to every corner of the office began to lift like fog after rain. 3 months later, the Kingswell account flourished. New doors opened across the Gulf and North Africa, and I was asked to speak at a regional summit about negotiation strategy and trust-based leadership. When I took the stage, I looked out into a sea of suits and ambition, but I didn't feel small anymore. I told them the truth, that the best deals I'd ever closed weren't won by outsmarting someone, but by understanding them. That leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room, but about being the one people trust when everything's on fire. 6 months later, Ryan never returned. Last I heard, he moved to a tech startup out west. Part of me hoped he learned something. But I didn't dwell on it. I had other priorities. The department I now led had become a place people wanted to be, not a stepping stone to somewhere else. We celebrated small wins, not just big ones. Interns were assigned mentors. Team members who had once felt invisible now ran client pitches and trained new hires. One of our youngest hires, a woman barely 24, presented a strategy deck that stunned the boardroom into silence. She later told me it was the first time she felt seen. I knew that feeling. 1 year later, the new door finally arrived. Brushed steel, matte finish. My name etched into the glass. Lily Harris, Director, Client Strategy. I didn't touch it for a long moment. Just stared. Not with disbelief, but with something deeper. Gratitude. For the journey. For the grit. For every hard-earned step. I had been tested. I had been targeted. But I had also been trusted. And in the end, I didn't just survive the fire. I rebuilt something from the ashes. Not just for me, but for everyone who ever felt like they had to stay silent to survive. In the weeks that followed, I continued reshaping the department, not with vengeance, but with purpose. I reopened lines of communication that had long been closed, turned monologues into conversations, and brought back the ones who had been quietly pushed out under the radar of politeness and bureaucracy. Some returned. Some didn't. But each one was contacted with dignity, with an acknowledgement that they had been seen, even if it came too late. I introduced an anonymous reporting system. No more whispers in elevators, no more fear that a complaint would end up in the hands of the person it was about. It wasn't just a policy, it was a promise. And I made time. For the new hires. For the interns. For the assistants who were barely a year into the working world, but already learning how to shrink themselves to survive. They came to me in passing moments, on coffee breaks, in quiet emails, sometimes just with a glance in the hallway that lingered a little longer than usual. "How did you stay strong?" they asked. I never had a perfect answer, but I always told them the same truth. "You don't always get to choose your battles," I said, "but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them." And as for Ryan, last I heard, he was interviewing at smaller firms out of state. The golden glow around his name had dimmed. Word travels, especially in circles that value integrity over legacy. His references were short, his interviews awkward. Some say Mr. Cole pulled strings to keep things quiet, to prevent his son's name from being publicly shredded. Maybe it was damage control. Maybe it was love. I didn't ask. I didn't need to, because the real justice had already happened. Not in court, not in headlines, but in the fact that I was still standing, and stronger than ever. One afternoon, I passed the glass-walled room that once held the Kingswell negotiation. I paused. For just a moment, I stood there and saw it all again. The panic, the silence, the whispered doubts. The trembling hands that still managed to place papers down with precision and poise. And then, the win. But I knew now that the win didn't happen in that room. It happened before. When I looked Ryan in the eye, and walked away. Not defeated, not enraged, but resolute. That was the moment everything shifted. Because I didn't plead. I didn't fight to be seen. I already knew my worth. And I refused, boss's son or not, to let anyone take that from me again. I walked away from that glass room with a smile. Not for what I'd endured, but for what I'd built. In the ashes of everything they tried to break. Because the legacy I was leaving behind wasn't just strategy or deals or titles. It was courage. And now, it was contagious.